All right, let's read another Rambler essay. This one from Saturday, August 11th, 1750. This is, of course, by Dr. Samuel Johnson, and I'm reading from a 200-year-old book, which I have to handle with great care. The title of this particular essay is The Misery of a Modish Lady in Solitude. It begins with a little Latin, which I'll do my best. Mihi tarda fluat ingradic tempora, by Horace. And then an English quote by Elphinson. How heavily my time revolves along. It's written as, this one is written as a letter to Dr. Johnson, to the Rambler, that is. To the Rambler. Mr. Rambler, I am no great admirer of grave writings, and therefore very frequently lay your papers aside before I have read them through. Yet I cannot but confess that, by slow degrees, you have raised my opinion of your understanding, and that, though I believe it will be long before I can be prevailed upon to regard you with much kindness, you have, however, more of my esteem than those whom I sometimes make happy with opportunities to fill my teapot or pick up my fan. I shall therefore choose you for the confidant of my distresses, and ask your counsel with regard to the means of conquering or escaping them. Though I never expect from you any of that softness and pliancy which constitutes the perfection of a companion for the ladies, as in the place where I am now, I have no recourse to the mastiff for protection, though I have no intention of making him a lapdog. My mamma is a very fine lady, who has more numerous and more frequent assemblies at her house than any other person in the same quarter of the town. I was bred, from my earliest infancy, in a perpetual tumult of pleasure, and remember to have heard of little else than messages, visits, playhouses, and balls, of the awkwardness of one woman and the coquetry of another, the charming convenience of some rising fashion, the difficulty of playing a new game, the incidents of a masquerade, and the dresses of a court night. I knew before I was 10 years old all the rules of paying and receiving visits, and to how much civility every one of my acquaintances was entitled, and was able to return with the proper degree of reserve or of vivacity the stated and established answer to every compliment, so that I was very soon celebrated as a wit and a beauty, and had heard before I was 13 all that is ever said of a young lady. My mother was generous to so uncommon a degree as to be pleased with my advances into life, and allowed me, without envy or reproof, to enjoy the same happiness with herself, though most women about her own age were very angry to see young girls so forward, and many fine gentlemen told me how cruel it was to throw new chains upon mankind, and to tyrannize them at the same time with her own charms, and those of her daughter. I have now lived 22 years, and have passed of each year 9 months in town and 3 at Richmond, so that my time has been spent uniformly in the same company and the same amusements, except as fashion has introduced new diversions, or the revolutions of the gay world have afforded new successions of wits and beaux. However, my mother is so good an economist of pleasure that I have no spare hours upon my hands, for every morning brings some new appointment, and every night is hurried away by the necessity of making our appearance at different places, and of being with one lady at the opera, and with another at the card table. When the time came of setting our scheme of felicity for the summer, it was determined that I should pay a visit to a rich aunt in a remote county. As you know, the chief conversation of all tea tables in the spring arises from a communication of the manner in which time is to be passed till winter. It was a great relief to the barrenness of our topics to relate the pleasures that were in store for me, to describe my uncle's seat with the park and gardens, the charming walks and beautiful waterfalls, and everyone told me how much she envied me and what satisfaction she had once enjoyed in a situation of the same kind. As we are all credulous in our own favor and willing to imagine some latent satisfaction in anything which we have not experienced, I will confess to you, without restraint, that I had suffered my head to be filled with expectations of some nameless pleasure in a rural life, and that I hoped for the happy hour that should set me free from noise and flutter and ceremony, dismiss me to the peaceful shade, and lull me in content and tranquility. To solace myself under the misery of delay, I sometimes heard a studious lady of my acquaintance read pastorals. I was delighted with scarce any talk but of leaving the town, and never went to bed without dreaming of groves and meadows and frisking lambs. At length I had all my clothes in a trunk, and saw the coach at the door. I sprung in with ecstasy, quarrelled with my maid for being too long in taking leave with the other servants, and rejoiced as the ground grew less which lay between me and the completion of my wishes. A few days brought me to a large old house, encompassed on all three sides with wooded hills, and looking from the front on a gentle river, the sight of which renewed all my expectations of pleasure, and gave me some regret for having lived so long without the enjoyment which these delightful scenes were now to afford me. My aunt came out to receive me, but in a dress so far removed from the present fashion that I could scarcely look upon her without laughter, which would have been no kind requital for the trouble which she had taken to make herself fine against my arrival. The night and the next morning were driven along with inquiries about our family. My aunt then explained our pedigree and told me stories of my great-grandfather's bravery in the civil wars. Nor was it less than 3 days before I could persuade her to leave me to myself. At last, economy prevailed. She went in the usual manner about her own affairs, and I was at liberty to range in the wilderness and sit by the cascade. The novelty of the objects about me pleased me for a while, but after a few days they were new no longer, and I soon began to perceive that the country was not my element, that shades and flowers and lawns and waters had very soon exhausted all their power of pleasing, and that I had not in myself any fund of satisfaction with which I could supply the loss of my customary amusements. I unhappily told my aunt, in the first warmth of our embraces, that I had leave to stay with her 10 weeks. 6 only are yet gone, and how shall I live through the remaining 4? I go out and return, I pluck a flower, I throw it away, I catch an insect, and when I have examined its colors, set it at liberty. I fling a pebble into the water and see one circle spread after another. When it chances to rain, I walk in the great hall and watch the minute hand upon the dial, or play with a litter of kittens which the cat happens to have brought in a lucky time. My aunt is afraid I shall grow melancholy, and therefore encourages the neighboring gentry to visit us. They came at first with great eagerness to see the fine lady from London, but when we met we had no common topics on which we could converse. They had no curiosity after plays, operas, or music, and I find as little satisfaction from their accounts of the quarrels or alliances of families whose names, when once I can escape, I shall never hear. The women have now seen me, know how my gown is made, and are satisfied. The men are generally afraid of me and say little because they think themselves not at liberty to talk rudely. Thus I am condemned to solitude. The day moves slowly forward, and I see the dawn with uneasiness, because I consider that night is at a great distance. I have tried to sleep by the brook, but find its murmurs ineffectual, so that I am forced to be awake at least 12 hours, without visits, without cards, without laughter, and without flattery. I walk because I am disgusted with sitting still, and sit down because I am weary with walking. I have no motive to action, nor any object of love, or hate, or fear, or inclination. I cannot dress with spirit, and I have neither rival nor admirer. I cannot dance without a partner, nor be kind or cruel without a lover. Such is the life of Euphanella, and such it is likely to continue for a month to come. I have not yet declared against existence, nor called upon the destinies to cut my thread, but I have sincerely resolved not to condemn myself to such another summer, nor too hastily to flatter myself with happiness. Yet I have heard, Mr. Rambler, of those who never thought themselves so much at ease as in solitude, and cannot but suspect it to be some way or other my own fault, that without great pain, either of mind or body, I am thus weary of myself, that the current of youth stagnates, and that I am languishing in a dead calm for want of some external impulse. I shall therefore think of you as a benefactor of our sex, if you will teach me the art of living alone. For I am confident that 1,000 and 1,000 and 1,000 ladies who affect to talk with ecstasies and of the pleasures of the country are in reality, like me, longing for the winter and wishing to be delivered from themselves by company and diversion. I am truly yours, Euphanella. Very interesting. I wonder how much of that was actually connected to Dr. Johnson's real life, if he actually knew someone like that. It wouldn't surprise me in his great scope of company. Thanks for joining me. Take care.